we're going to go from there. So welcome everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. It is a lovely morning here in Santa Rosa, California, the place on the planet that I currently call home. Why start this community discussion? Speaking for myself, I have been hungry for a place where I can think collectively with others about the big issues that are facing us. I think that we are in a paradigm shift, and I don't even think we're at the start of it anymore. This paradigm shift was already recognized by some in 1976, when I sat in Scott McPherson's Environmental Social Studies class at Santa Rosa Junior College. And mind you, that's almost 50 years ago. And he talked about the paradigm shift. And he taught us there's no such thing as a free lunch, and that paradigm shifts happen when big new understandings emerge. And that seeing our globe from space as that tiny, beautiful marble was the beginning of a big new paradigm shift. And the paradigm shifts take a long time to happen, that there are early adopters, mid-time adopters, late adopters, and as Scott McPherson said, there are some people who die without ever getting it. So I think we are in the early stages, 50 years maybe of a long paradigm shift. And I think we need to fundamentally and completely change the way we understand human species' relationship to the planet. We're shifting from a mechanistic Newtonian sensibility of seeing the earth as machines, as under human dominion, under human domination, as an earth whose sole purpose is to serve humanity. We are shifting from that view to a more nature-based systemic understanding. We are coming to understand that we are only a small part of the great web of nature, and that the ways and means of nature and the laws of nature that apply to every other species and all of life also apply to our species. So I think we've been getting it wrong. We're not separate and above nature, we're a part of nature. And if that's the case, then every single human decision that was used using Newtonian principles at least needs to be re-examined. Maybe some stuff we got right and we'll keep, but it needs to be re-examined, re-estimated, re-understood, regenerated, viewed through the lens of systemic understanding, developing our right relationship with nature. So I have been hungry, like I said, for a space to talk about global regeneration in a collective setting. And it seems like the Global Regenerative CoLab is a perfect place for this conversation. So I'm so glad you're here. Please invite others you think would be interested. I'm looking forward to a community discussion as we evolve our understanding of the paradigm shift that we're all experiencing. The only ground rule is that we move the conversation forward. Idle complaining is down the hall. I believe our species needs to learn how to be in right relationship with nature. And I hope our conversations will be journey focused as we evolve our viewpoints and as we move together into the unknown towards the collective futures that hopefully many of us will be here to experience, hopefully. And with that, I asked Tanuja if you'd like to share why you're here and why you agreed to do this with me, and take the floor.
Yep. So like Pam, I can't say that I am seeking sort of I was seeking this journey from a very young age. That's not the case. But what I come from a science engineering background, and I've always felt that our paradigms, our models that we use in science, in business especially, and definitely in economics, were not correct. They did not reflect what actually happened in life and in nature. So the one big question I've always had, you see, economics is not a natural phenomenon. It's not like gravity, you know? It's something we invented as human beings. So if we invented it, why are we not inventing it such that it's for everybody? That's something I didn't understand. And the other thing is, economics is an artificial model created by us for our convenience. Why did not we build it with all of the principles that we know apply to any model that human beings create? So we treat economics as though it's some sort of a God-given natural phenomenon, and that we must abide by whatever rules currently exist. But that is not the case. So I would like to see economics be shifted through an experiential, empirical viewpoint. So what all of us have experienced in our lives, whether we're business people or not, bring that to the table, have the discussion in this space, let that diversity lead to a new way of looking at things, and let us then move forward, knit it all together into a solution that works for everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, we are inspired and hopeful to be a part of a collective conversation. And so maybe we could go around and have everyone just take a minute to introduce yourselves and give us an idea, maybe a sense of your theory of change. That's but a short one, a short version, so that we can all go around and then we'll pick up some themes and talk.
Yeah.
All right. Tanuja, you want to pick the next person? We'll do it popcorn like that.
All right, sure. Jeffrey, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Joffrey. I'm located in Copenhagen, and currently still studying my last semester. So I'm writing my thesis, but I'm also doing projects in Uganda and Angola, which are about regenerative practices with different networks. And yeah, I'm kind of the founder of a consortium of 7 NGOs, which are looking into regenerative practices in Uganda, and I'm looking into collective impact. So how can we create also economies for people who actually collaborate and would like to bring about the same vision, basically. So yeah, this is my input. I'd like to pick Colleen.
Hello, I'm Colleen Dick, and I'm in Utah in the United States, and it's been a cold May here so far. Anyway, looks like we've got some sun out today, which is a good thing. And maybe I'll get my garden put in finally. But I'm working on regenerative villages to take a whole systems approach to village building, so that we can eliminate almost all of the waste, put it into some kind of a recyclable form. I'm passionate about figuring out what we do with all this plastic. Because it's a real problem for all of us, I think, right now. We're sort of on the cusp of getting funded, it looks like, for our first village. We'll see. We're cautiously optimistic still. But our goal is to try to help to repopulate in a regenerative way the midsection of the country. Americans actually have a smaller population in that area than they did 70 years ago. And so I think that cities are kind of obsolete at this point in time. We need to return people to the land and give them the skills to be part of nature's processes. And so that's what I'm all about. Leopold, would you like to go next?
Hello, I'm located in Vienna. I don't have much knowledge in economics. My professional background is in software development and electronics. So my naive hope was that with the invention of the blockchain and Bitcoin and all the other stuff will create an alternative possibility with a decentralized system. But finally, currently, for me, it looks that it is also just another hyper-capitalistic game. So I'm very disappointed. Yeah, I hand over to Uyana.
Oh, we lost. Oh, there she is. Hi, you're on mute.
Yeah, hello again. I am Uliana from Ukraine, now based in Germany. I'm working with the Ukrainian Eco-Village Network, now challenging the community strategy building. And what I see now is the really fast transformation when each eco-village become like self-efficient and the autonomic system, when the network really do not depend on any policy and laws. And yeah, I just deeply interested how we can build bridges between the locals, between the communities and the government and the global NGOs and companies. Maybe in such questions like land use, resource management, and human resource management, to build the economy for everyone. So that will be not just economy, but kind of economy held by everyone, and it will be just a part of the culture of everyday being. Yeah, and I will give it to the David Witzel.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I'm David Witzel, and I am sitting in Oakland, California, which is unceded Ohlone land. I spend most of my day coordinating the GRC, so sending out calendar invitations and things like that. I kind of got excited about, I've been trying to go back and explore why I got excited about regeneration, to try to kind of recapture some of those threads. And one of the threads is definitely from kind of an economics perspective. I'm just an amateur interested in it. I've studied it a little bit and read some books and things, but couldn't be called an economist by any stretch. But I find it fascinating, and the things we've learned and the things that we can gain from it, and the blindnesses that I think it creates. And so it's, I think, a great opportunity to have that conversation around, you know, what is it we don't see because we're looking through an economics lens. So I'm very excited about that conversation for that. And thanks to Pam and Tanuja for kicking it off. It's really wonderful of you to do this. Archie, let me kick it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks. So I'm based in Nairobi, and frankly, any call that Tanuja is involved in and organizing, I'm going to attend because I know I'm going to learn something. In terms of economics, I think it's circular economics that I'm looking at. So my project is taking high carbon residues. We refuse to use the word waste. So things like nutshells, tea prunings, and put them through a process called gasification, which is low oxygen thermal conversion. That produces electricity. Just to give you an idea, the per unit or the per kilowatt hour cost of electricity in Kenya, the commercial rate on average is 15 US cents, 15.08 to be precise, so not cheap. And that is really killing the economy, right? How can you build industries if your electricity is that expensive? I mean, there are other issues around sort of talent and so on, but you know, our focus is the industrial energy piece. We then produce biochar as the sort of byproduct of gasification, and then that goes back onto our beautiful heavy clay soils, which are older than the dinosaurs and in serious need of replenishment. And then we're also looking at enhanced weathering, which is where you crush high silicate rocks, so in our case basalt, so that you're accelerating the you're doing two things. You're accelerating the drawing down of carbon dioxide, because that's what naturally happens. It's a nature-based solution, even though the US government seems to think of it as direct air capture. But you're accelerating it by crushing the rock, so you're increasing the surface area. But what's even more important, well, or maybe just as important, is you're putting back nutrients in the soil, because these rocks have potassium and all these beautiful nutrients that every time we grow crops and we pull those crops out of the ground, we're removing and not putting anything back in. So my whole world is circular, I guess I'd say. So yeah, I'll hand over to Eckhart Beatty.
Thanks, Artie. It's actually Beatty. But on that note, I think one other attribute you may or may not have covered is it's a term referred to as enhanced rock weathering. Just the process of breaking down rocks, which is something that nature is good at, but over millennia, it contributes towards drawdown. In fact, drawdown.org listed it as, I think, in the top 80 to 90 in 2018 of the top means of drawing down atmospheric carbon to balance the carbon in the atmosphere. So that itself is not insignificant. And my story is, I guess I would have to say it's a long story, but in about 4 years ago, I worked with an organization called All Power Labs here in Berkeley. I'm in San Francisco. And if you've heard of them, they have been instrumental in gasification. They're maybe not as widely known as they should be, but they've been doing a great job and in very high temperature, very pure, efficient gasification of biomass, and that leads to a very still yet under recognized high value black gold, if you will, biochar. In addition to providing very smart power, which can power microgrids in places like Africa and India. So that's been my education about the potential, direct potential for regeneration. And I'm working with a company right now called SimSoil, maybe you've heard of it, maybe not. I'm happy to tell you a little bit more. We're trying to get funding right now and see if she's got a very interesting program in Iowa, 1 million acres. And maybe you've heard her story, but I could say more. We're trying to launch a solar startup where my partner is based in Pune, India, but he's been in Silicon Valley for 30 years. So we want to introduce it largely through my connections to the United States. And it's a solar one-axis tracking system for optimization, basically making things more efficient. Leopold mentioned something about blockchain, Bitcoin, etc. I've heard it all, but I feel like at this point, I'm more optimistic than I am pessimistic in the long run. I'm hoping it's more of a kind of a reflection of the natural processes of decentralization, and that the governance has gotten right. I think it will be, but there's going to be some hiccups and roadblocks along the way, maybe, but that it'll end up changing the financial system for the better. Who knows? I have no idea what exactly to expect. But it's exciting. It's very interesting, and there's always something new, which I crave. And I would love to collaborate with lots of you guys about a slew of different things.
Thank you. Yeah, it is interesting times that we're in. This morning, the Emergence magazine was in my email, and it's Navigating the Mysteries by Martin Shaw. And if you don't know Martin Shaw, he really is worth learning about. He is a drummer and a philosopher and a mythologist. So he writes that as we walk our questions into the troubled future, we are invited to do the hard work of opening to the mystery. And it is, and he believes, because when you're a carpenter, everything looks like a nail, and when you're a mythologist, everything looks like it ought to be based in myth. But I think myth really is an important undercurrent that drives our lives and decision-making much more than many of us believe. And they manifest in the decisions that we make, in the values that we develop and hold. And I think that we can spend hours talking about getting a project going, and it's absolutely worthwhile for those involved in doing that work, and there's nothing at all wrong with it. The idea, and this is I work with inquiring systems. We're a nonprofit, but our mission is to bring systems thinking into the world and to help understand how everything is interconnected, and that a decision made in one place will affect everything else, like it or not. You can't think that what you're doing is somehow not going to impact others. And it's very difficult to figure out all of the unintended consequences that might come from your decision. But I think it's incumbent on us all to think through as many of those unintended consequences as possible. And when it comes to economics, that is such a fruitful place where this really manifests, where I think it's so interesting watching the whole blockchain phenomenon, the Bitcoin, the whole thing. It has always struck me a little bit rooted in capitalism, and that if it's going to be rooted in the systems that have brought us to this point, anything rooted in the systems that have brought us to this point, carry some seeds of myths that we came to believe centuries ago, largely that we are the main gig on the planet, and then everything else is here to serve us. And so the suggestion has been made to talk about circular economy as yet another way. So we have Bitcoin and blockchain, and we have circular economy, which I think is the donut. Is that correct? Kate Rathworth? No, that's something different. Tanuja, talk about those two different.
So I'm going to leave Aarti to discuss circular since she's actually doing it, and my comments would be all theory. But
Okay,
donut economics is being developed by Kate Raworth in the United Kingdom. The idea is to have an economic model that includes nature and side effects as part of the model. So there no longer would be side effects. So when you have a model that starts to include those things, then what that means is you have to develop mathematics that includes those things. That's the difference.
Which is the root of economics.
Yes, exactly. And the one thing I'd like to see, I don't know if the donut model has it, is more leverage points. Remember, economics is something we invented.
Right.
Why did we not invent leverage points? It's like if you have a car, you invent a car, and then you say there's only one door for everything, for the engine, for the passengers, for the luggage, everything. And that's what they did. So you've got interest rates. It seems to be the only leverage point that can be used. And think about how far removed interest rates is from anything real, like you and I buying stuff. So,
all right.
Sorry.
Well, I was just going to ask Aarti to talk about circular economics.
Yeah.
Sure. So just I think the idea is that, till now, or for a very long time, we've been living in a sort of extractive or sort of taking, making, and wasting or disposing sort of economy, right? So whatever it is that we extract, whether it is crops or minerals or oil and gas, which then turns into plastic or whatever else, we produce goods, clothes, we wear them once, twice, then we throw them out. And the idea with circular is, sort of looking at sort of the design of what you're doing in the first place so that you keep these resources in the system for as long as possible. You want to minimize waste. Even sort of shifting goods around the world, you're sort of trying to look at, well, how do we sort of make some of these supply chains shorter? But it is, there are concepts like repairing, repurposing, upcycling. And not everything is circular, even though it says it is. So if they talk about, you take tires or footwear and then you convert them into some other product, that's not really sort of strictly speaking circular. But this whole idea is, how do we keep the basic resources and the products in the system for as long as possible, and whatever is deemed waste, if you like, something that's at the end of its life cycle, it goes back into the next cycle.
Yeah. And if I could, go ahead, Eckhart, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but what seems to me, and I think it goes without saying is so exciting about nature is that it's autonomous. It doesn't, you don't have to reduce it to a formula and sit down and say, wait, let me get the mathematics right. My father was a mathematician, so I mean, a world-class computer science mathematician. They didn't need that. Nature doesn't need that. It does it by itself. And that's the amazing thing, it seems to me. We can say we can do nanotechnology. Okay, well, that's all well and good, but nature doesn't need that. It cross-communicates, it balances things. It does it all by itself. It doesn't need us to do that, which I think is what's so amazing. If we could mimic it more, understand it better,
Right.
or just let it be, then that's the biggest part of it, I think. And then we could all be in balance. Question is, it's easier said than done, but that's why I was really drawn to biomimicry in 2013. And for 18 months, we had a monthly biomimicry swarm. We called it a swarm. We met every month, and it's the best meetup I ever attended, because every time I learned something new, and it was always so exciting, different aspects to it. And then it stopped. But I also know that in that same year was the last edition of, what was it, the upcycle. The two gentlemen who started in Germany, who started the upcycling, the whole concept of upcycling, the architect in Virginia, and then his counterpart in Germany. And I read the book, and it's very good. And at that point, it abruptly kind of stopped. And then I started hearing about the circular economy within half a year. And that seems to make more sense, the circular economy, as opposed to the upcycling. You know who I'm talking about, right? I just can't remember their name.
Yeah.
They come back.
Yeah.
Not to
right.
dismiss their role. They obviously did a lot in introducing the idea of, cycling and repurposing, and very eloquent in doing so, but there's more to the picture than just repurposing.
There is. There certainly sometimes it feels like anything that humans touch somehow gets turned sideways, and I want to use the word corrupted, but that's not a good thing. But we certainly seem to overplay our hand continuously in whatever it is that we set out to do. Yeah.
Really good at messing things up.
Do
it's
others
too bad
have?
if you took all the capital that we spend in wars, going back to the beginning of wars, and think of what we could have used that for, then we wouldn't be working 50, 60 hours a week chasing the next dollar, making it's just absurd. It doesn't make any sense. And then we talk about progress and our economy, is it growing? And all these things, like during Reagan, is the economy growing? I don't know. I mean, it just seems like we could have been like Elon Musk. We could have been at Mars already. We could have all had a Tesla in every garage. I don't know. The other
personally,
thing is,
I hope those guys do leave the planet. Bye.
Yeah, and maybe come back. The other thing is, I was just going to add, those who don't know about Donella Meadows, it took me until last year. I attended her memorial service 21 years ago, but it wasn't until last summer that I read her book, Inquiring Systems. I think that's what it's called, right? Donella, she and her husband wrote a number of books, and one of them, a good one to read, is Thinking in Systems.
Yeah.
So I listened to the audiobook, so I recommend that. I think it's very accessible. It's a bit involved, but I'll leave it at that. Thought it was a great book.
Yeah, I agree with Donella Meadows' books, especially the last chapter where she gets quite philosophical is wonderful. But a question comes to mind for everything you've said, Eckhart, and that question is, and I'm going to ask this question to all the people who have products that they're building. Aarti, you've got a product. If we look at the market today, a lot of new so-called better for you products are coming out, you know, less plastic and etc. Everything is marked, price marked at 40, 50% above similar products, right? Now, here's my question about economics. How is this supposed to work when every new product that brings in, people want to generate profit, lower the risk of the investor? So the price they market at is 40% above its equivalent. So does that not create, by default, inequity? Right? So
Nisha,
now we're
I
saying,
don't follow. What's the 40%? I didn't follow that.
so for example, potato chips, yes? So regular potato chips, let's say it's $1 per bag. Someone comes out with potato chips that is organic potatoes, organic oil, and they recycle. So they have a circular economy model inside their business. That is priced at $1.40. Why? Because the company has investors. They don't know if it's going to take off. So the investor says we're going to do what's called premium pricing. Yeah. Everything out there, if you look at in the entire sustainability product space, is premium priced. Then we talk about the economy creating inequities. Are we not building that in? So what's the solution?
Well, and yes, and not just inequity enough is enough on its own, but in addition to that, what it is building in is that it's building in the need to continue being extractive in order to afford the premium pricing. That's what I always come back to and see is that all kinds of groovy new things, that's what I call what you're talking about, the groovy new things, they all can only be afforded by people who have engaged, in all likelihood, extremely extractive, abusive activities for the majority of their life. And in order to enjoy that beautiful vacation in that eco-tourist destination, imagine the energy that it takes to be able to go there. Now, I know there are plenty of exceptions in that, and I don't want to have a non-starter here, but I really think it's worthwhile to think about the unintended consequences of decisions, and creating a premium priced product is probably not going to end up being all that helpful in the new paradigm of being more aligned with the natural ways and means. So I think that is going to turn out to be a pretty important part of the new solutions, is supporting things that don't extract more than they return. And Colleen.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, actually, because if we're going to have some kind of a demonstration sites or whatever to show how this can work better. I mean, there's so much waste in our current systems, so much redundancy. And there's that if we take nature as the guide, you know, all of the feedback loops are closed. And so the biggest problem that I see right now is that human beings don't have the skill set of living in natural systems. We don't even know how to do it. I mean, most of us, okay? But there are people who do have the knowledge and understanding of how to do that. So the more that we can create educational systems, whatever, based on those principles, the
Right.
faster, you know, but we have to win the hearts and minds of people in order to do that. And so, I mean, right now, I think all of us have a sense of insecurity that we're trying to cover in some way or other. And we do that by going out and earning money and extracting things and all that kind of stuff. And we think if we do that enough, then we're going to feel less fearful. And so if we can come back to living in communities where it's not all on you personally, that this individualized thing that we've created where everyone lives in their own house with their own car and their own lawnmower and all that kind of stuff, it really isn't very efficient or effective. And so part of what we need to do is learn how to work with each other again, how to be in community, how to cooperate with one another in ways that nature does. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well said. All right, Joffrey.
Yeah, I'd like to make the connection actually back to nature again. So we've been talking about circular economy. There's also this notion of cradle to cradle. So where you 100%ly almost, you know, don't produce any sort of waste basically. But anyways, Tunisia, you were touching upon valuation in the beginning, which is really interesting because we are the ones who created this economical concept anyways, right? And so my initial question is then from the outlook of regenerative practices, what is the value actually, you know, we give back basically to society as well. And you can see this as, you know, we do value, give back value to a lot of communities as also, which was just said before as well, through, you know, communal work and especially in our Western culture, is something which is kind of lacking a lot. How we can, you know, get back to this more community kind of feeling. But so to make that point, so what I'm looking into at the moment is, okay, how can I measure the impact that we are doing as a collective group on social, but then also on the environment as well. But then also economies. We're looking into microfinancing and building opportunities for also refugees to actually adopt, you know, or to be actually self-sustaining as well under the circumstances they live in. And so the question is, what does the society actually value? And I think like this is really important because where we put the value into at the moment, or maybe a good example is greenwashing, or you know, also the fair trade products, which are then being produced basically also in regenerative agriculture as well, which are then, as also Tanuja, you were saying, put onto higher price, right? But then this kind of like perpetuates the same kind of culture, economic culture that we live in at the moment. So how can we define maybe a different kind of measurement for the value that we're producing? So, which is why I was thinking about also some other ways where, or just thinking about it, where there's this notion of you know, climate adaptation and different kind of benefits, biodiversity valuation, for example, as well. And there's this notion of ecosystem services, a regenerative agriculture field can provide, right? So these are a lot of different kind of values, but they're not, there's no price on them. And maybe at the moment it's something good, because I think we have to define something new in order to actually start a new sort of economy, which is fair and which is also seeing what kind of impact it can actually have to nature and to the people at the same time. So kind of like shifting the mindset from the consumeristic kind of culture, economical consumeristic culture, which is still really like in all our heads basically, right? And so this is like where I think like where we have to make this kind of shift. And you were saying, Leopold, in the beginning about blockchain and about all of these different coins, right? That exist. There exist eco coins, for example, which look into this, and this could be one way, right, to shift to a different economy. But then again, how can we value it in a way which is fair, basically, and not basically put onto the old kind of regime of the economy?
Right. That's the question for sure. Thank you, Joffrey. And Artie?
So I have two things to say. One, everyone keeps talking about this cost of living and inflation crisis that we're going through. And somebody said the other day, 500 tea bags cost £4.20 in the UK. And I thought, okay, but if you take a step backwards and going back to Dhanuja, your point around, so do we charge more or do we not charge more for things that are produced through regenerative agriculture? I think the fact is that we've got so many middle people from the consumer all the way back to the producer. What we really need to do is spread that money. Certainly have to start by spreading that money in a different way from the way we do. And I mean, that includes within the borders of Kenya, right? Kenya produces 25% of the tea exported, but there are middlemen and cartels and middlemen, right? So the end farmer just ends up getting very little, regardless of how the tea is produced, right? So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing, I think certainly in this part of the world, sub-Saharan Africa, where I am, too often we have knee-jerk policy making. So today I was on a panel with the former governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, and he was talking about the fact that it's very fashionable in Africa to tax digital, right? And including, for example, mobile money transactions, because governments just see that as a quick buck. But what they didn't anticipate was that people would stop using mobile money, and therefore actually now they have a shortfall in their tax revenues. So I think what yes, use tax. The point I made was use tax when you want to discourage behavior, right? So if you want to stop fossil fuels, tax fossil fuels. If you want to increase employment, reduce income tax. Certainly at the lower end of the scale. Yeah, I mean, I think that also has to be, at the end of the day, again, I'm talking about the global south, right? We have so many needs that are unmet, basic infrastructure, clean water. I know clean water in the States, you have issues too, right? So, we have, how do we have regenerative water in sub-Saharan Africa? How do we have peer-to-peer energy trading so that we have like distributed grids or distributed energy use, and so that we're not sort of shifting energy halfway around the country into very, very remote places where putting transmission distribution is just not, the dollars and cents or the shillings and cents just don't add up. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Dave.
Absolutely.
David.
Yeah, Archie, I think, I mean, that. So one of the things I've been wondering about, and I'd love to have in, part of the exploration of this session series is kind of, so like the tax analysis, right? I mean, traditional economics does a lot of really good thinking about what taxes are about, right? And what you said, kind of fits into very much a traditional tax economics kind of framing, I think. And so one of the things I've been wondering about is I don't think you get to start from scratch and throw away economics, kind of, there's a lot of intellectual value in it. The question is like, what's the regenerative part that's different to me? This is something I'd love to know, or maybe it's another way to say is like, what's what's the core of regeneration that if you sacrifice it, you're no longer thinking that way, kind of. I don't know, but what's how do we, because I don't think, it's like we talk about all this stuff about how like you need to create a new model. If you want to change the system, create a new model. It's like, yeah, fine. But you don't really start from scratch. You start from somewhere, We're not going to create a new language. We're not going to, So anyway, I guess so one of the things I've been worrying about is this, what is it that we need to protect, I guess, around this notion of regeneration, that if you were to sacrifice it, you've just fallen back into the old system. And I don't think I have a very good definition of what that core thing is yet. And so anyway, I'd love to explore that more.
Yeah. So can I jump in on that, David? I was, while you were speaking, it occurred to me, there are two essential considerations when we talk about creating anything, whether it's a business or a system. So the economy is a human created system. Yeah. So in that sense, we have the luxury of saying, we will define all the parameters. Yeah. And in that sense, we can then use biomimicry principles and so on and so on. So that's one. The second is when we talk about, say, water or creating a regenerative water system. Water is a natural product. So the only thing we can do is to dance with the system, the two differences. So create the system and dance with the system. And the two modes of thinking, the design modes of thinking will be different.
So who's designing the system? Excuse me, Dave. I just putting that question out there. It's a bit rhetorical, but I think it's important because I think it's a piece of the understanding is who's in charge of defining the change.
Yeah, so I wouldn't put the in charge part because that sounds very political. I would say much more there's a knowledge base because we currently lack the knowledge base to answer most of the questions that Aarti has brought up, David had brought up, and Jeffrey brought up. We don't have the knowledge base. So I'm just trying to create use cases and questions that can probably trigger a different way of thinking. Jeffrey, you want to go?
Yeah, I would go on to sorry, David. I'll just make it quick. So the question was, who's changing the system? I think it is also primarily the innovations which are changing the systems, such as also the Bitcoin and the blockchain and the more like niche kind of environments, which can then at some point maybe be adopted by the larger system. So, and I would pretty much say that also regenerative agriculture is also part of the more niche, as well as agroforestry and all of these climate adaptive, like nature-based solutions, basically. And there is no real defined economic valuation on that. So it could be an opportunity, for instance, to actually define something and make this maybe a trial to define and see how we can see and how we can, define basically the valuation of that, what we were asking before as well. Yeah.
And I really want to hear Dave. Dave, please go.
Oh, you don't. I'll go rant on this forever. I guess I was gonna say I feel like Tunisia, I agree with you kind of. I would argue that economics, people would trade and interact and build whether or not we called it economics, right? So yeah. Economics is our attempt to explain these interactions. Right. And so I don't think it is a natural system to some extent. And I do think there's a couple of levels. One is that we somehow have promoted it intellectually and in government and policy to a very high level. So we do look at people to create economics for us, I think, and manipulate the rules and things like that, which is fascinating. And I think we need chief sociologists more than we need chief economists, but we are where we are, And I do think that there's been things that economics is kind of blind to. And I would argue, I've got a couple of examples, but one of them is the notion of abundance. I feel like, when I studied economics, it was always the allocation of scarcity. Economics hasn't been very good at trying to figure out what abundance means, right? So that's why we don't, economics doesn't understand Wikipedia or, the internet or things like that, right? Which kind of my background. So there are blind spots in economics, I would argue, at the very least. And, maybe some of those blind spots represent regeneration.
Yeah, agreed. So can this be a space? Look, I'm not going to, we don't have time, but I'm not going to redefine what this place is, but can we then say that this space, this discussion space, takes use cases? Colleen, your eco-village, Uliana, your eco-village network, and Arti, your regenerative, your circular economy, and look at the essential questions that you have asked when you design those things, put them together, even as a list, nothing else, just a list. And then we can revisit that list and start saying, these are the properties, characteristics of an economic system that we want.
Right, because these innovations grew out of questions and needs, and I think that sounds brilliant. And it is 9 o'clock where I live, 9:01, and I do want to honor our time. So this has been fabulous, fascinating, exciting. I hope you'll come back and tell others, and we will continue this conversation. And next week, I'm hoping Tanuja will have a little set of slides on complexity science, because I think that's a piece of helping us understand what's going on. And
the other thing Pam is not saying is that I'm all for very, let's say, wrestling type discussions. Yes, but wrestling in a kind way, David. And so I'm going to try and set some parameters around that. What it means to wrestle and nobody gets injured.
Nobody gets hurt.
That's right. And that we can move forward. So I hope, please do not bring boxing gloves. Do not. But come to wrestle.
Ah, beautiful.
Quick
All
question.
right.
Quick question. Do we have a repository of files so we can share amongst us? I mean, in most cases we don't. But
I'll do that. We'll do that. We'll create that sort of commons around this. So thank you all.
And you use the Slack, right? Use the Slack.
Use Slack. Okay,
we'll
use
create
Slack.
a channel.
We'll start a channel. Is that what we need to do?
Yeah.
All right.
Or adopt one of the finance ones, or whichever we want to go. Yeah, we can discuss.
All right, we'll talk about it. All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for your participation.
Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.